Hello everyone, it's Silvia from Tarot. Welcome to my channel and welcome to my monthly wrap up for the jolly month of July, which has been, I may say, quite overwhelming when it comes to tarot and oracle decks purchases, and that depends on the fact that I have been visiting some of the most furnished shops I've ever seen in my entire life when it comes to decks. I have, seriously, I'm thinking, but honestly, nothing comes to mind. The Kinokuniya stores, both in Bangkok and in Singapore, were the most furnished, absolutely 100% I've ever seen. And it has been incredibly difficult for me to actually rein it in and try not to spend my entire month of salary worth in decks. It helps on the fact that I do have a Kinokuniya membership card, so of course I've got the discount, but it's also helping the fact that the prices they sell the decks for are incredibly cheaper than the rest of the world, in specific in Australia. And it's a wonderful thing that they also store decks that actually have been produced locally, so they actually sell them with a really reasonable price, which is something that will never happen obviously if you want to buy them from Australia. And I'm referring to many of the decks you know, realized by local artists, and that you can find in the Tevada website or Etsy store. But let's have a look, because it's a lot of decks. I couldn't even fit them all in the same frame, so let's start talking about this, otherwise we're gonna be here forever. Let's have a look at the Sims Tarot. I've talked about this deck a couple of times before in a video or so, so I'm not gonna talk too much about it this time. The Sims Tarot stands for Southeast Asia Myths and Stories Tarot by various artists from Southeast Asia. And it actually is not just a tarot, but there's also 3 decks of oracles: the Nightfall Bagua Oracle, the Distant Lights Bagua Oracle, and the Silent Dream Bagua Oracle. Now, where the tarot deck is actually a cooperation of different artists, the Bagua Oracle have all been produced, realized by Leonard Jim Narciso, and the concept and design was by Rowan Ong. Now, this deck, as I explained a couple of times before when I was showing it for the first time, is incredibly beautiful. Generally speaking, I have included actually this deck in my video about the surprising decks, because I normally do not buy decks with different artists, cooperation decks, let's call them that way, like the 78 Nautical, etc. Because it's just the way my brain is wired. When I don't see cohesiveness and continuity in the artwork, I find that I actually struggle not to you know, I struggle bonding with the deck, and it's something that it's really depending on how your brain is reacting to the artwork, etc. But this deck was a very positive surprise, in the sense that even though it is a cooperation of artists, I do find that the fact that there is a common theme, which is the Southeast Asian myths and legends, actually makes sense to me, and it makes it so that I don't find it difficult to read with it at all, and I really like it. And even though it does take me a slightly longer time to familiarize myself with the card, in the sense that I look at the artwork and then I look at the of what the card is. So in this case, for example, the 8 of Wands, it's not immediate to me to think of the 8 of Wands, because I tend to be taken off, lifted out of the cards by the fact of the you know, the differences in the artwork. But that is absolutely not a problem, because there's you know, it's a beautiful deck. There's alternative cards as well, as you can tell. What I really enjoy is the fact that when you have time to go through the cards, for example, you can actually look at who the artist is and where they're coming from, which is always really cool. And this is for example, the Strength card has been drawn by the artist that had the concept of this deck, so Rowan Ong, who's from Singapore. And so this is an amazing deck, and even more so when you look at these three oracles. So as we said, the Night Gold, the Silent Dream, and the Distant Light. These are all illustrated by the same author, so the artwork is cohesive and it's absolutely beautiful. It's got that kind of distress kind of look to it, and it shows you the trigram and the meaning of the trigrams, and it's got a bit of an alchemy elements to it as well. It pairs up really well with the tarot. I've shown that in a couple of videos, and I really enjoy this deck, so I'm actually very happy that I could find it. I think this one I bought this one in Kinokuniya, Bangkok, I think, the one in Siam Paragon. So this is the Sims Tarot. Then the second deck I want to talk about is also one of those decks that has been locally produced and by local artists, of course, and you can still find this one in the Tevada shop. Actually, I think that the last time I checked, it was actually out of print, so apologies for that. I'm not entirely sure you can still find it. I will put the link in the description box below just in case. This one was a lucky find, so if you have the possibility to go to Bangkok, if you are in Bangkok, the store, the Kinokuniya store, both in Siam Paragon and in Central World, still have this deck on stock. So, you know, if you were looking for it and you couldn't find it online, there is this possibility to find it in the actual store at a really good price. So the Luna Lapan is actually quite famous because it's a really cute deck. So the concept is an RWS clone, as you can tell, but all the protagonists are bunnies, are cute, so cute bunnies. And I love this strength card because there's this sense of overpowering strength of the lion, which is menacing because it's showing its teeth, you know, and it's looking down, so much bigger than the bunny, but the bunny is actually standing up and looking right into the eyes of the lion, and he's, you know, he looks like he's standing his ground. And that is a really good way to picture to draw the strength card. And I also love this hermit card as well. So as you can imagine, it's all about the cuteness. Even the death card is amazing. I absolutely love this deck. I haven't used it yet because I just keep on looking at it, and I just want to take in all the cuteness of the characters, the way in which everything is, you know, presented. Even the colors are not too strong, there's not too much saturation. It all corresponds to the elements. So you've got the suits, you know, the normal suits that you can find in the traditional RWS. I love this Six of Swords, it's so beautiful. It's just a really cute deck, but don't think that it's not gonna tell you the truth, or don't think that this is gonna be a hug deck. Because I have the feeling by looking at the cards that yes, it's absolutely cute and adorable, but on the other hand, it does feel like the messages are definitely coming through the way they're supposed to. So it's one of those decks that I like to call them my my gentle decks, my kind decks, in the sense that they don't necessarily slap you with the truth. They don't hide the truth either, but they tell you the truth in such a way that it is in a constructive way for a constructive purpose. And what I really like is that there's actually 80 cards in total. Is that 80? 100, sorry, there's 100 tarot cards in total. So these are the cards that you can find that are in excess of the 78. I love this pinky. So in the booklet, you can actually find the meaning associated with these additional cards, which can be seen, for example, or used as an oracle deck, which is always very appreciated whenever, you know, I can do that. We've seen it for the Sims deck before, because also this has been produced by the same artist. Oh, console card, look at this, this is so cute. I know that they're bunnies, but they just remind me of my cats. When it's the same author, it works even better when you want to pair them up as a tarot and oracle. So it's a very, very beautiful deck. I really appreciate it. It's one of those decks that I think it has been probably published more than once. This is from 2021, and as I said, it might be out of stock or out of print online, but the last time I checked in Kinokuniya, Siam Paragon, there were at least 3 or 4 copies of that. So, you know, if you have the possibility of you're already in Bangkok, why not just go in there and snatch a copy. So this is the Luna Lapin Tarot. And another one of the, let's call it the Mali Publishing tarot decks. So again, these tarot decks have been produced locally by local artists. And like the Luna Lapin, for example, you can find them in the Tevada store, but you can also find them in these bookstores. So in this specific case, again, Kinokuniya. This is the Stray Cat Tarot, and the reason why I bought this is because I had just bought the Luna Lapin, and I was thinking to myself, how cute would it be if I could find a deck that had the same concept as the Luna Lapin, but had cats instead of bunnies. And then I found this one. Honestly, I didn't even know of the existence of this one. This has got really beautifully black edged cards, and of course it's got cute but also kind of strong looking cats in it. As you can tell, it's not just about cuteness, it's also about, you know, the powerful messages that the cards are going to convey to you. And I do appreciate that as well, because in any case, you know, there's heaps of cute cat decks out there, but this one looks like it's really standing its own ground. As the other decks that we've seen before, it is an RWS clone. I follow the RWS. I love that in many decks you can find the fish coming out of the cup for the Page of Cups, but in this case it's even more significant because you have a cat, and if you have a cat you will know how much they love fish, or at least my cats do. And I really enjoy this one as well. And the fact that I bought this one, look at the 9 of Cups. It's very similar to the 9 of Cups, interpretation of the 9 of Cups on the Luna Lapin, in which there was a rabbit that was more or less in the same position, and the 10 of Cups as well. So it feels like it's made, you know, in the same way. So it's got still that kind of concept that tells you that, you know, yes, it's cute animals, but the message is still coming across loud and clear. And in many cases, you cannot make the mistake of thinking that this is a cutesy-dootsy kind of hug deck, because it's not. Look at this 8 of Swords, for example. I really like it. 9 of Swords. I don't like the 10 of Swords like that, but that's the way it's depicted most of the time. I love the use of the symbology of the salamander for the Suit of Wands. It's a cute deck, but again, as I said before, very similar to the Luna Lapin in that concept. You got cats instead of bunnies. This one doesn't come with the additional cards for the Oracle, but and the reason why, let's say, I went back to the store was because after this I bought this cute little deck, because I wanted to see if it paired up well with the tarot. So let's have a look. Let's just shuffle this one to see how these two pair up together. I actually haven't tried it yet. So July, as I said, has been a very hectic month, in the sense that we've been traveling for most of the month. Well, basically started from the first week of the month we've been traveling. And it's been a hectic month in the sense that I never knew when I could actually film. Filming has never really been a problem, but you know, uploading, processing, and uploading especially, you do need a really good Wi-Fi connection in order to be able to upload the video on YouTube. And therefore, you know, I was really concerned that that would have never always it wouldn't have been the case in many places we were going to, because we were going to pretty remote places. But I have to say that it's never really been a problem, so I was quite happy. I had the opportunity to film you know, from a few places where you know, they really deal with tarot, not just by selling them. For example, there is this place which is a tarot bar in Singapore that I've shown you into the Tarot on Tour Singapore episode, and it was amazing to talk to the owner and Shamini, and you know, she was lovely. She explained to me how the tradition of tarot is coming back in Southeast Asia because it's becoming more and more acceptable, and it's also because the tradition of divination comes from many other countries, and in Singapore you do have that integration between migrants from different countries. I think I've shuffled it enough, perhaps we can proceed. But it was an eye-opening experience, if I may say, because in many cases I found that shop owners, well, Kinokuniya was always very hard. I have to say, yes, they have the most amazing collection I've ever seen when it comes to tarot and oracle deck, but I also have to say that they were not forthcoming, they were not helping. Obviously because they were concerned about safety issues. And I don't want to say anything anymore about that, because I did have not a pleasant episode, and I talk about it in the Tarot on Tour Bangkok episode. So you know, that's all I want to say about it. But in any case, yes, you can find definitely the huge collection you dream of in those stores, so Kinokuniya and Asia Books in Bangkok, for example, or Spectrum store in Singapore. But it's the lovely conversations that I've had were more with the local business owners, the ones with their smaller shops, you know, the ones that really care about the fact that you're actually talking about them in your YouTube channel, and they're very grateful, because obviously for them it means you know, it's just free advertising basically. So let's have a look at how these two pair up together. Obviously now there are no keywords in the Curious Cat Club deck, because originally it was intended to be a playing cards deck. However, there is a bit of a guide to use it as an oracle, as you can see here. So for example, in this case, the 7 of Clubs refers to weightlifter. Yeah, we can see that. Training being a badass, which is fantastic, because obviously, you know, it refers back to the 10 of Wands and the 9 of Wands. So you really have to be a badass, because after you're so tired and exhausted after the 9 of Wands, you still have, you know, something else to achieve. You still have some road to cover, and you need to be able to do that. But you also need to be able to lift all that weight that is on your shoulders, and in some cases you need to realize that you actually need help. I think that even though there's not the same level of cuteness, and I know that that sounds really strange, even when I said that sentence in my head sounded really strange, and the different level of cuteness. So in the sense that the stray cat tarot is not, let's say, 100% cute, whereas the Curious Cat Oracle is, I do believe, 100% cute. But I still think that these two pair up really well together. They do, in any case, share a very similar kind of vibe, and when you start learning the meanings of the cards on how to read this deck, the Curious Cat Club, you'll see that there's a lot of resonances with the keywords and whatever is going on, and the message that is brought about by the tarot. So I'm quite happy that I bought these two decks together to work together. It's also, they were both very affordable. You know, converted in Australian dollars, this one was about $16, $17, even less with the discount, and this one was about $50-$60. I can't remember exactly, also because I could apply the discount, as I said. But it's been a pleasure, you know, visiting those places because of all of the decks. And I have to say that the way in which they display them is also very, very well organized. So it's very easy for you to find a deck in specific if you're looking for something, which was in my case, it was this one. Obviously this one was not with the tarot decks because it's not a tarot deck, but it was with the playing cards. That sometimes you can use playing cards with oracle decks and something like that. But these two, I'm really happy about them. And sometimes you also see the same kind of spots on the cats in both decks. So we paired them up, and this is the Stray Cat Tarot, and this is the Curious Cat Club playing cards deck. And another deck that I purchased in the month of July was the Gatsby Love and Wisdom Oracle, now by Australia Montian PhD. I think I've talked about this deck before because I've included it in my Tarot Cocktails video. And this deck, ever since then, has become one of my favorite Oracle decks. And it's actually something that really surprised me. I think I included this in my surprise index as well, because I really was hesitant at the beginning, and it was just because of the name. Because to me, the Love and Wisdom, I don't know what I expected. Obviously I was wrong. It's completely different from my expectations, and it was actually a really good surprise. So this deck is absolutely beautiful. It reminds me of the Silver era again, that I can't pronounce that word. And I really love it. I wish I could actually go back in time and spend a couple of years in the roaring 20s just to be able to wear these, you know, head dress things and these clothes and the jewelry, and being able to drink cocktails and, you know, spend my life away like that. Obviously we all know how it ended, so it wasn't exactly going in the right direction. But, you know, life is what it is. It's what you make it. And I really love the movies that were portraying those years, because it really shows the decadence that became almost something to look for, you know, something to achieve. The decadence in life, basically. And it's also because there was a lot of attention to poetry, to literature, and women were starting to become very famous because of the way in which they rebelled against society. There are a couple of books, for example, I don't remember the name of a book. If I do, I will just put it in the description box below, but there's a book that describes this fantastic woman that lived in New York, and she was single. So obviously, you know, it was difficult to be single back then. Never wanted to get married. She was traveling all the time, and she had a nephew, and she was traveling with his nephew, her nephew, and just showing the world, and, you know, and doing fantastic things and glamorous things and eccentric things, because that's the way she wanted to live, and so be it. This deck is quite precious. The product value is amazing. It comes with this really beautiful purple kind of glossy edging or gilding, but I do believe that there are different versions of this deck, and I also do believe that it's also sold in the Tevada store, or at least in the Etsy shop. As always, I will put the link in the description box below. I loved pairing it with the Silver Era Tarot that we talked about before, and I think I've shown this pairing a couple of times already, so I'm just going to do it very quickly this time because I don't want to repeat myself. But it was a surprise. It was a really nice surprise, because these two decks, they're really good together. They literally refer back to the same kind of time, you know, the roaring 20s in many ways. This one definitely a lot more. And the concept behind the Silver Era is that we can actually look at some sort of a darkened version of the RWS, in the sense that we do see that there's a black and white. predominant black and white, but there's also a splash of color, and generally speaking the splash of color is only about one single element. So in this case you can see it's on the top of this character here, and in this case is on the bird of the world card. So it's something that really works well with another couple of different oracle decks, in this case the Gatsby for sure. You can really tell there's also a similarity when it comes sometimes to the clothing. There's similarities as well when it comes to directionality. There are many different ways in which you can read directionality between these two decks, because the characters tend to look out of the frame. That's where directionality works best. Obviously not when it's looking at the fourth wall, it's breaking the fourth wall like in this case, but there is directionality from the Six of Wands, towards the oneness, to celebrate your own uniqueness. Perhaps the Six of Wands to me is the card that reminds you that yes, you did win, yes, you're being celebrated, but don't forget that you actually won because you had a team that helped you win. But in this case the figure is kind of oblivious to that and looking forward to their own uniqueness, which is possibly what's this message is about. And then but reminding us that there will be a communion, there will be a union of the heart or also of the mind. So there is this kind of conversation going on between these two decks, which is really good. One other deck that I believe pairs up really well with the Silver era kind of oracle is tarot is the Sacred Nature oracle. So I am just going to show you this quickly. This deck is really beautiful. It's by Holly Wilmette. It's a really big deck, so just to show you the size of it. I have had my eyes on this deck for a while, in the sense that I looked at it, I looked at a few walkthroughs that I could find on YouTube. Whenever you type the hashtag on Instagram, you can see all of the posts on Instagram that contain this deck. Hopefully, sometimes they don't, I don't know why. But let me just put back some of the tarot card as well. These two work really well together because they share not just the same type of, let's say, muted color palette. Obviously we've seen the fact that there's black and white and only one splash of color in the Silver era, but it's also because the style of photography is very similar as well. So in this case the Sacred Nature style of photography is more like a sepia tone, whereas this is more like a charcoal distressed kind of black and white. But it still works really well because the sepia tone reminds you that there are different gradation, there are different shades on the color. And obviously the Silver era with this splash of colors here and there reminds you of the presence of this muted color palette. So aesthetically I find that they're actually very pleasing together. But what really surprised me and what really gave me this kind of jolt whenever I saw them working together is how well they actually work with the focus brought by the keyword on from the oracle deck, and then the expansion that you can have following the tarot cards. So we've got creativity between the Knight of Pentacles and the Three of Cups. And it's something, it's a message that really works. Obviously referring back to the traditional meanings of the tarot, we've got alignment between the Two of Swords and the Lovers. Perhaps these talk about this kind of choice, because the Two of Swords is when you're stuck between a rock and a hard place, and you're blindfolded, you don't really have all the information you need to make a decision, you're kind of stuck. And you also know that if you make the wrong decision, you're going to hurt yourself. So you need alignment. Alignment is needed in a situation of a Two of Swords, and perhaps this will help you see the choice that you need to make with the Lover's card. Now, I find that it's very interesting that the Lover's card in this deck is actually two people looking not at each other, but looking away from each other. This is very interesting to me because it's not your traditional depiction. In some cases it might be, but it's very interesting because it's got its own meaning. It's a symbol by itself, and you can decide to read it in an intuitive way, or you can go back to the guidebook and see whether the author is offering you their own interpretation. So have hope even when everything seems lost and you hit rock bottom. Have hope and use the kind of the empathy that you achieved in the progression of the court cards in the Suit of Cups, where you start with the empath, which is the Page of Cups, and then you progress into your own, when you master your own emotions like the King of Cups does. Your emotion, try and tap into that hope and get away from this collapsed situation. So these two work, as you can tell, as you can see. I hope I'm actually showing this to you, but they work really, really well together. I will be keen to say that they work even better when you use them for shadow work. However, I do find that many of the messages of the Sacred Nature Oracle are actually very positive. So it's not necessarily just about shadow work. In many cases, you can use it as a step forward from shadow work to actually develop something into the light. And I really do appreciate these two together. As I said, it's just a magnificent conversation that they're having together. So this is the Sacred Nature Oracle, and I paired it up with the Silvia Era Tarot. So another couple of decks that I bought this month were the Inner Eye Oracle by Stephen Bright and the Malefic Lenormand. And this is the name of the author, which I don't want to pronounce because I'm pretty sure I'm going to butcher it. Now, this Lenormand is actually really beautiful, and I've had numerous conversations with people reading Lenormand because they all share my opinion, which is, you know, it's nothing new, to be honest. It's just that until 5 or 6 years ago, we all thought that a Lenormand deck did not necessarily have to be artistically, let's say, pretty, because you know, it doesn't necessarily change the meaning of the cards whether you represent you know, a ring in a certain way or another. However, there's been so many new authors, you know, trying their hand, artists trying their hand at designing a Lenormand, that is actually becoming more and more of an intuitive kind of deck. Now, let me make this concept straight and clear. I am not saying that the Lenormand system is intuitive. As a matter of fact, I believe quite the opposite. The Lenormand is very set in the sense that you have very set meanings for the cards, and there's so much so that they even have set combinations. So obviously when you read 3, 5, 7, the Grand Tableau, straight cards in a row, you have a sentence that comes up as a meaning of you know, coming out from the cards. However, I do believe that in some cases, when you're facing decks like this one, for example, that have a lot of free will artistic interpretation of the cards themselves, even though the names are the same, you can, if you feel like it, I believe that you can actually add a couple of different perspectives, a different shade to the reading of the cards. And I don't know, it feels like I was talking about the crossroads, which is a choice obviously, but in this case, because it's depicted in exactly this way, as if it was a block of earth floating into space, you can definitely add the solitude aspect of making a decision. Yes, you're making a decision, it's a difficult one, but it's also something that makes you feel alone. You know what I mean? So it's obviously something that it's an add-on. It's not. So let me say, personally, I don't think it's wrong, and I also don't think it's something that should be. Let's say it's not something that it's not set in stone. I find it difficult to explain myself because I don't want to offend anyone, and I know that in some cases people have got very strong opinions about system of divination, and in some cases they're very, very fixed, which I'm okay with, because I know that Lenormand is a lot more straight as a shooter than a tarot deck, and a million times more straight a shooter than an oracle deck. But I do believe that it still leaves some space for your own interpretation of the cards. And I was reading Rachel Pollack's latest book, and Walk into the Forest of Souls, and basically she's saying exactly this, although she is referring back to the tarot cards, not specifically to the Lenormand, but she is saying that you start from knowing the system, and then if your guts tell you something different, then you need to follow your guts, because we are the interpreters of these kind of cards. The message that comes to us is a message that we need to read, interpret, and then relay back, and then we need to make it such a message that it is understood and delivered correctly in an efficient way to the person we are reading for. And so I do believe that this can apply to the Lenormand as well. But I'm curious to see what you guys think about it. If you think that Lenormand should be read almost or only and exclusively in the way in which it has been set up as a system, I'm completely fine with that. Let's have a look at this oracle deck instead. So this is the Inner Eye Oracle and by Stephen Bright, and this is also let's say a plain deck, but the association of the cards is with the keywords, and you can actually use it as an oracle deck as well. Now, unfortunately, my copy came with a few flaws. I don't know if you can tell, but there's a lot of transferring in this one. You can tell a lot more. There's a lot of transferring from the ink from the card on top onto the the white space of the cards below, and it happens on practically every card. I don't mind, to be honest, because when I start using a deck, sooner or later I will sort of ruin it anyway, so it's not something that, it's not gonna stop me from using this deck. As a matter of fact, I may like it even more because it makes it more mine. Because of this, it's actually more like my own deck. It does not preclude me from choosing a card because the flaws are not on the backs of the deck, so it's not like there is a mark and I will know that that one is a specific card. These are all the same, so it's not a big deal. It's edged in red, which I really appreciate. It's a beautiful deck. It's actually very, very it will be a surprise using it because the keywords are fantastic. The keyword and the association with not just the card itself, but also the artwork on the card is really good. I really appreciate that. So you will notice that like in many cases, when you have a plain cards deck that you also use as for a divination system, in many cases it will be a hybrid between an oracle deck and a tarot deck, because in some cases, it does return to the traditional meaning of the suits, especially when it comes to the minors, because it looks at the minors in practically the same way. So the suit of cups, which is referring back to the suit of water, and in many cases is the suit of the heart, of the emotions and the feelings. You will have, for example, the two of cups, like the two of hearts, could be read as romance, and so on and so forth. Memory is more like the six of cups to me, but in any case, so it's not all, but the five of cups could be seen as loss. So in many cases there will be some echoes between the two systems, in others is completely different, and that's where it makes it even more interesting, because once you think that you know something, and then you will be surprised because it's not exactly what the deck is telling you. I really enjoy this deck. It's very beautiful, the artwork is beautiful, as I said, the association is very interesting. I actually love the way in which some of the characters are drawn, even though there is a lot of the space of the contrast between the white spaces and the black spaces of the figures on the cards, and it's really a beautiful deck. I have been pairing it up with the Nightfall Tarot by Emery Abbott, and I'm going to show you how well these two work together, even though I have to say, in this case, the Nightfall Tarot, I haven't used it many times, but perhaps you can already tell. Let's see if I do this. I don't know if you can see it here, but many of the cards are chipped already on the gilding. The gilding is a nice silver kind of gilding, but unfortunately I don't know, it was my fault, obviously. I probably used it not too much because it's a very recent acquisition, so it cannot be the number of times that I used. Perhaps it was a bit rough. I should have been more considerate when using it. But in many cases I found that the cards came like they were glued together, and then when I started separating them, perhaps I should have taken more care in doing so, and I didn't. And that's one of the reasons why perhaps now they're chipped. So what I'm going to do as soon as I go back home, I'm just going to trim off just a little bit of the borders, because I actually don't mind this black border around it. It looks like it's actually kind of giving it a bit of a frame. But let's have a look. So this is what I've done. This is the way in which I've used them. I've used the Inner Eye Oracle in the center as the focus for the message between the two tarot cards. I'm just gonna give it a quick shuffle. Always being mindful of the gilding, which is, I realized even now, it's kind of coming off, and you can, I don't know if you can tell, maybe not, but it's basically on my hands. It's like I've been playing with glitter. It's when my nieces were little, they were playing with glitter all the time, and I remember going visiting them and then coming back home and I was full of glitter head to toe. Which was fine for me, but sometimes we were playing with my husband and he was full of glitter as well. He was going to work the day after and it was a bit awkward. Let's put it this way. So let's have a look at how these two pair together. So as always, I'm just gonna put the two on the side, the tarot on the sides. By the way, again, sorry about the noises in the background. I had to put the aircon on because as you can imagine, it's really hot and humid in this region. I'm still in Southeast Asia. Let's see if I can, okay, that's a bit better for the light. And let's shuffle the Inner Eye Oracle, which is a pocket-sized deck like you would expect it from a playing cards deck. So these two, they work really well when you, let's say that at the beginning I wasn't really happy about this pairing because I found that I needed to distract myself from the natural, I could recognize the cards for their tarot meaning. You know, whenever I was seeing the Three of Cups, I was going straight to the meaning, sorry, the Three of Hearts, I was going straight to the meaning of the Three of Cups because it's the correspondent on the suit. But if you actually step away, if you take a step away from that and you just focus on the keywords, it actually starts working really, really well. So let's have a look. Obviously the black and white works as well, and I really like the fact that you know, even though there are splashes of color on the Inner Eye Oracle, because obviously they're referring back to the suit. See this card, they just keep on sticking together, even though I went through them one by one. But eventually this happened, I think, because it's so hot. And when I travel, I have to, you know, put them in my suitcase. And sometimes the suitcase has been under the sun, and I have the impression that it might be because of that, that there's a little bit, still a little bit of bleeding. And am I saying something completely wrong? I don't know what I'm saying here, but that's something that I thought could happen. Otherwise, I don't explain how they keep on sticking together. Perhaps an excess of glue or something like that. Can you see what I mean? It's really beautiful when you have this kind of resonances with the colors as well. But you know, if you don't look at the 9 of what is this? I don't remember the name in English of this suit. So when you step away from what would be the normal way to interpret this is basically referring back to the swords, the suit of swords. The 9 of swords will be about the anguish, the anxiety, the waking up at 3 a.m. and it's definitely referring back to the keyword on the oracle as well. But in some other cases, so for example, the 8 of Cups, so this is the 8 of Hearts. So to me, I will go straight to the 8 of Cups, and I will think about that character who's leaving something broken behind, and they advance and they leave the cups, and some of the cups are overturned and they're spilling their contents on the ground, but they're leaving, the character is leaving because they know that whatever they were doing there has come to an end, and they have to, you know, take a different road. That's definitely not related to the keyword passion to me. Perhaps in the sense that you need to follow your passion, even though sometimes your passion is taking you to a, I don't know, perhaps a different different environment. You have to leave something behind to follow your passion. That could be a way to interpret that. But it's, in some cases, I find that it really does remind you of the interpretation of the traditional symbolism of the RWS. In other cases, it doesn't. So it's really beautiful also to confront that, to have that kind of possibility. Because, you know, you not only have at your fingertips the knowledge of the tarot system, but also you can have, in addition to that, you can rely on the inspiration that the oracle cards and the keywords on the oracle cards is giving you for the reading. My goodness, this deck, I really need to do something. I can't wait to actually being able to trim it so that this problem of sticking together will stop, because it keeps on doing that. I think this is probably the last time that I'm going to show this deck on camera until I trim it, because they just keep on doing that. It's a pity though, because these two work really well together. They're really, really beautiful. And I, for one, I actually appreciate a deck even more when I know that it pairs up really well with an oracle, or vice versa. I appreciate an oracle even more when I know that it gives even more meaning, or a deeper meaning, to the significance of the cards of a tarot. So this is the Inner Eye Oracle, and this is the Nightfall Tarot. So this month I've been really lucky because I found the Lost Card of Tarot, the limited edition, and I didn't have to pay $300-400 for it. I actually paid the normal price it was released with. It's an edition by Lo Scarabeo, and the artist is Andrea Aste, who is, I'm proud to say, is Italian. He lives in the UK. He's also the artist behind the most recent The Book of Shadow and Alchemy Story Tarot, and also is the artist illustrator behind the I think it's called the Tarot of Shadow and Light. Apologies if that's not the correct title. Now this deck is amazing because it's based on a very interesting concept, that tarot, that finally someone has found the lost code of tarot. So there is this idea that tarot has it comes from a code, and that code has been lost, and with time the significance and the meaning of the cards and also their configuration has been changing depending on the tradition that was picking them up. But once you find that code that was lost, you can actually go back to the primary source and go back to that original meaning that it was intended to when it was created the first time. Now, if you're familiar with Andrea's artwork, you will recognize it. It's a very beautiful, very unique kind of artwork. I really love all of his decks. I'm very happy. I just recently, I think a couple of months ago, I got my Book of Shadow and Alchemy story got in, and it's in full color. As a matter of fact, it's a really saturated, brilliant colors that I really like. And it's the kind of deck that you really love, even though, as you can tell, the minors are pipish, but I don't mind because there's a lot of work into these pips. They're not lazy pips, and as I always say, I always appreciate much more an elaborate kind of pip rather than a lazy one. It's kind of an obvious sentence, of course, but you know, there's pips and pips. I mean, there's different intention in the pips as well. Look at this Ace of Wands, isn't it just amazing? So I was really lucky to find this deck because it's out of print, it's hard to find, even online you don't see very often. It's not very often sold on Facebook groups, for example, or on you know, on eBay or Etsy stores. It's very difficult to come across. So I was really happy that I was able to find it, and I actually found it at the bookstore Asia Books in Siam Paragon. So this is the Book of Shadow. Sorry, this is the Lost Code of Tarot. And the next deck is also another locally produced deck. So this is definitely published in Thailand. It's the Guanine Oracle card. I think on this side you can actually see the title in Thai, as you can see, in gold stamping. And on this side is in English, and it does come with an English instruction booklet. It has been published in Thailand. I did find it in a Thai store. So this is the booklet. So the first pages are in English. It doesn't, let's say, it doesn't really elaborate much onto the meaning of the cards. It does give you a couple of keywords, as you can see, but when it comes to, so when you see the difference in pages from the Thai version, there you go, this is the English version and this is the Thai. It's really a pity because, you know, I can imagine that there will be a lot more that you can actually have a look at, and you can really go deeper into the meanings of the cards when it comes to the Thai version. So what I might do, I may actually use Google Translate and Google Lens and try and see whether you know, I can make sense of the translation, because I do not speak and I do not read Thai. This is a very beautiful artwork in this deck. What I like is that you've got, obviously you've got the artwork and you've got the keyword in English and obviously in Thai, and it's a Guanine. So obviously if you're not familiar, but I'm pretty sure that everyone knows about Guanine. It's just that kind of beautiful aerial type of divinity that is part of Buddhism. And you can find it in many decks, and especially in oracle decks lately. There's been a few published by Blue Angel, a few published by, even one by Los Scarabeo. I seem to remember a couple published by US Games. This one isn't. It's not a mass market. It's a deck that has been locally published. Perhaps it will be picked up mass market, I don't know. I really like the fact that there's a lot of resonance between, you know, the artwork and the keywords on the cards. Obviously you do need to go back to the guidebook every now and then, because if you're not familiar with Buddhism and you know, the meanings of the various deities, it might be a bit of a struggle to remember the keywords and to remember what they mean. But it's always very interesting, and it could become a study deck. It could become one of those decks that is actually very interesting to dive into the history behind the cards and the choice of the author to portray a particular card and associate that with these particular keywords. So this is the Guanine Oracle cards. So I talked about this deck a couple of times before. It's the Doors of Somlipits by Anna Cortez, and it's been illustrated by C.J. Freeman. This deck is interesting because it is a totally new system, and it just says, or it says, a new dimension of card reading. It's a really huge box, and it comes with a very chunky guidebook, which is really full of symbology, and it really talks about many different divination systems. So it's definitely one of those guidebooks that you end up having to study. And I really appreciate that. It's something that it always gives me joy, because it's something that it's new. Learning something is always something that I appreciate, and it gives me also the opportunity to integrate whatever my knowledge is, whether it's very basic on one system or more advanced in a different system, but I can always bring them together and perhaps achieve a new level of intuition when I look at the cards. Now, the cards are actually not that big, which is ironic because of the size of the box. The cards are poker size, which makes it easier for me, obviously, to handle. But in a way, because when traveling, then the fact that the box is very big, it represents a bit of a problem, because I will have to pack it and make sure that it fits with all the other decks that I bought this month, which is not going to be an easy task. Anyway, so these are the cards. I think I've shown these before. So this again has the same concept of a playing cards deck. So you've got the minor suits in here as well. They are actually in gold stamp, which is very nice. It's a very nice touch. And you got gold stamp when it comes to the keywords at the bottom as well. You do have a lot of, let's say, archetype on this deck and associated with the cards. Obviously, you need to go back to the guidebook to understand the actual association between the card, the artwork, and the keyword. But what I found is that this deck is very useful whenever you want to do the kind of shadow work, whenever you want to look into the things that are in the shadow at the present time, because for one reason or another you don't feel like you're ready to face. And it could be referring to trauma, it could be referring to something you're actively avoiding. You can bring them back with the help of the right deck. You can actually bring them back to the surface, bring them back to the light, and actually assess them, and being able to decide whether you want to still keep them and nourish them, whether it's something that you can actually use for healing, or they can be simply be let go of whenever it's something that doesn't serve you anymore. So this deck is very, very useful for that, and it is the Doors of Somlipits. And now we come to something that I really, really anticipated for such a long time. I was so excited when I went to Kinokuniya in Bangkok and I saw this oracle deck, because even though it has been released, I think back in May in the UK, and then in Europe, and then also in the US, it's actually not being released in Australia until probably September or October. I might be wrong, but in any case, it has not presently been released in Australia yet. So I don't know anyone in Australia that has it. As usual with the last ones. This is the mass market edition, so picked up by Lenormand 11. So it's not the deluxe edition of this deck. You've probably seen the deluxe edition in many YouTube channels, because it's a very beautiful deck. It's by Fez Incrite, and it's got that traditional Lenormand 11 kind of box, which is a two-part box like that, and it's very beautiful, but it's very compact as well, which I really appreciate for the reasons we were talking about before. It's always about making enough room in the suitcase to hold all of the decks. It comes with an instructional booklet, which is this one, and it's fully illustrated. You got a whole page for each and every one of the card, and then you got a little bit of the description of the card, an upright interpretation and reverse interpretation. What I do appreciate about this deck is the fact that at the beginning I was kind of wrong. I thought that these would have been just let's say archetypes, so it would have been a deck of archetypes, but instead it's a bit of both, I believe. I mean, you do have the archetypes, so in this case you can read it's the aspirant, but then you also have keywords, so you can definitely use it for archetypal work, but you can also use it in the normal way you would use an oracle deck. So for the assassin, we got ruthlessness and conviction. For the catalyst, we got radical changes and taking control, the diviner, the fate, and so on and so forth. The artwork is absolutely beautiful. I really love the combination of the muted color palette. There's only a couple of colors here. There's a lot of work done with the black and red, and obviously you can probably tell if I do this, there's a lot of gold stamping, but it doesn't distract you. It's not the type of gold stamping on the card that looks like blobs of, you know, of gold. It's actually really well done. The production value of this deck is really good, and I think that perhaps not all of the 11 on 11 decks have a really good production value, but this one for sure does. And since it's a very recent acquisition of my collection, I actually haven't had the opportunity to use it too much, and therefore I don't really know yet which tarot deck would pair up well with this. I'm kind of thinking something black and white or muted color palette would probably pair up well. It's also a very unusual kind of shape, as you can tell, so you need to take that into consideration as well in some cases. Perhaps it would go well with something odd, something like the Inner Eye Oracle could pair up well with this one when you refer back to the meaning of the suits, and not necessarily to the keyword of the Inner Eye Oracle. I don't know, I'll see. I mean, it's something that it's always exciting when you have your deck and you try new pairings and you try using it in different ways or in different spreads. It's one of those things that I really appreciate, and I was talking about it in my video about the decks that surprised me, because I was saying that when you read tarot for so many years, you tend to develop your own kind of preferences, and at the end of the day you kind of have your bias in some way against some decks because you think already you know them and you know you're not gonna like them, and then instead you convince yourself to buying them and you find out that it was completely the opposite of what you thought. And so that is actually a really good surprise. And I have to say that the fact that this, I really thought that it would have been just a archetypal deck, and it's not. That's a really good surprise for me, because I do have a couple of archetypal decks and I don't think that I need more than a couple, because working with archetypes is a very let's say when you have a really good deck of archetypes, then you don't need more than one. But in this case, you can use it in, you know, different kind of situations, different kind of readings, which is always a plus. So this is the Citadel Oracle. But let's talk about this deck. This deck is absolutely fantastic. It's a very recent publication. It's called the Mantra Oracle by Sterling Ethos. It says it's an essential deck for self-discovery. To me, it's a lot more than that. As a matter of fact, I think that self-discovery doesn't even cover it in the sense that, okay, it's called the Mantra Oracle. So as you can imagine, of course, each and every card will have a mantra on it. Let me just say that on top of everything, this is a very affordable deck. I only paid something like 20 Australian dollars for it. But the product value is very good because the cards are quite big, as you can tell. They're edged in gold. The book is very interesting. It's not massive, but it's very interesting. It's got at least a page and a half for each and every card, which is always you know, important. The artwork is spectacular. The cardstock is actually very good. It's that kind of matte but very sturdy with a really good bounce, and it's just a beautiful deck. You've got this kind of sense of a really deep meditation that you can achieve just by looking at the cards. It's a deck that is very conducive for inner work, self-discovery, absolutely, like it says on the cover. But it's not just that. So as you can tell, there are obviously there's the artwork, there's also a mantra at the bottom of the card, and there's also the relationship between the mantra and the English interpretation of that mantra itself. So you can eventually use it for when in any way you use your mantras. So if you practice yoga, of course you will use it for meditation. You can use it for prayer. You can use it for any kind of self-worth path, for example, a practice that you're using. It's something that it's very versatile. It's a deck that pairs up really well with, for example, I'm thinking the Mind's Eye Tarot, which I don't have yet, but it does tend to remind me a lot of that kind of artwork. And the use of the brushstroke and actual, not just the brushstrokes, but also the actual artwork itself. And it's the way in which the contrast is obtained through the use of different colors is very similar as well. So I really like it, and I can't wait to get that tarot deck in order to be able to see whether this is indeed a pairing that will work or not. But you can use it as an altar card as well. Each and every day you can just pull a card, look at the mantra on the card, and then use it in your own practice. So this was a really pleasant surprise for the price that they sold it for as well. So the Mantra Oracle. So let's talk about books. Those were all of my decks, but now we've come to 3 books that I had the possibility to read this month because I had more time to read, and obviously whenever I travel I can really get into it. Now, first and foremost, this is a very funny book. It's called Root Science, Everything You Always Wanted to Know About the Science No One Ever Talks About, by Stefan Gates. It's a very recent, I think, publication, and it really talks about everything that our body produces. That it's kind of gross, really, and I think it's called root science, but it's not exactly rude. It's just that it talks about stuff that is not necessarily an argument you would talk about when you have a dinner in a fancy place. Let's put it this way. And originally I bought this for my husband as a present for him because I was sure that he would have been into these kind of things, because he does have that kind of humor. But I actually did enjoy it myself very much because it does make you laugh. It's one of those books that you need to read these kind of books every now and then, and just not to be always reading serious stuff. Even though it is completely scientific in the sense that it's not saying something that is not true, it's something that is actually proven, but it is the kind of things that you don't really want to discuss with your grandma, let's put it this way. So this is the Root Science by Stefan Gates. And then I reread for I don't even know how many times The Ultimate Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy by Douglas Adams. This is the 42nd anniversary edition, and the reason why, well, you should know why the 42nd is actually an important anniversary for this book. If you don't know, read the book. I'm not going to tell you. This book is absolutely wonderful. I don't mind it's one of those books that I will never mind reading over and over again, because even though I know what happens in the plot, I know every twist of the plot obviously now, I know it by heart, but it doesn't matter because it's written in a very fantastic way. There's a really glorious evolution of the characters. There's so much depth that you can find in all of the protagonist of the book, and you can really enjoy, and you find yourself, for example, sometimes you find yourself in one of the characters, sometimes you find yourself in a different one, but I think there's a bit for everyone in this book. And it's amazing because even the By a Traveler is even more so, because as you can imagine, Douglas Adams himself, he used to love to travel, and the idea of writing this book came to him because he was saying that whenever you travel, if you're a backpacker, you have these books that sometimes are outdated, and so you follow the instruction, you go to a place, and then you find out that it closed down years before, and that's something that happens to you, but it's something that you can remember 10 years afterwards, and you can talk about it with your friends because it's something to laugh about. And he was saying that something like that, very similar, happened to him all the time whenever he was traveling. And so the idea came to him of saying, what if someone actually wrote a guide, you know, a hitchhiker's or a backpacker's guide to the galaxy? And that's why he called this book like that. And it's a fantastic book. Again, if you haven't read it, you don't know what you're missing. So please do yourself a favor and read this book. You won't regret it. And I have to say, I read this book, The Ferryman, by Justin Cronin. Now, Justin Cronin is the author of The Passage and The 12 and other books as well. And the reason why I bought this book was because The 12 is probably one of my favorite books of all times. And I love the way in which he writes, and I still do. He's a master of the words. He can really build up a world that is very interesting, and he keeps you on edge, and you would keep on wanting to read ahead. And as a matter of fact, I think I read this book, which is about 600 pages, if I'm not wrong. No, 538. So in any case, it's not a small book. I read it in a couple of days because it was just one of those books. However, I have to say something. I don't know what happened, but for 450 pages, and if you have not read this book, please skip ahead because there's going to be a lot of spoilers now. So really, absolutely, if you have not read this book and you want to read it, please skip ahead. I'm giving you 3 seconds. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so if you're still with me, it means that you already read it for some reason, or you don't want to read it. So for 450 pages, there is a character building, and you really love a character. There's let's say two main characters, and you love one, which is the main character, because it's your hero, and you love him because he's got all the flaws of the heroes. You know, he's reluctant to join the quest at the beginning, but then he has to because there's the inciting incident, etc., etc. And you hate the villain because the villain is the opposing to the hero, and you know, you develop these kind of feelings. You fall in love with the hero and you hate the villain, and that's what you're supposed to do, and that's what makes you like or dislike a book. So for 450 pages, the book goes on like that, and you're really into it. And as I said, I still think that Justin Cronin's way of writing is absolutely masterful. But the last 100 pages, you find out there is a massive twist, and I have nothing against massive twists. As a matter of fact, I actually love them. However, in this twist, let's say the personality of both the characters changes completely. Like there's literally an 180 turn on their personalities, to the extent that perhaps not so much the hero, but the villain that you learn to hate for 450 pages, and you did hate that with passion, it turns out that it's actually very, very compelling character. But you just can't get that because 100 pages in the economy of a book that has 550 pages is just not enough. You know what I mean? So I was a bit disappointed. Having said that, I still recommend it because it is, it is Justin Cronin. If you loved The 12, if you loved The Passage, this will have the same sense of urgency for you to keep on turning the page. But just, obviously, I did give away a bit of the ending when it comes to the twist. But you will see. And as a matter of fact, I'm very interested to know your opinion. If you have read this book already, please let me know in the comments below what you think about it, because I might be completely wrong, or you might have a completely different opinion, and I would love to hear it. So nothing is set in stone. Now, this month, I also wanted to show you a couple of rings that I have the opportunity to buy, because as you know, I really love rings. So these 3, I bought them at a shop that I talked about in my Tarot on Tour Singapore episode. I bought them in a shop that is Isaiah 45, and that refers to a shop that is in Haji Lane number 45. Look how beautiful they are. They're absolutely gorgeous. And this one instead, I bought it in Bangkok in a street that is parallel to Tanong Kaosan. So the Kaosan, if you're familiar with the Kaosan Road in Bangkok, the one parallel to it, sorry, the one that crosses it is called the Silver Road, because there's at least, I don't know, 50, 60 store that sell silver jewelry, and this one was one that I bought there, and it's absolutely beautiful. I really love it. I'm not wearing it because I still have my henna and I don't want to ruin it, but otherwise I would definitely wear it. So this was it for the month of July. It was a month that was really packed with purchases of as you can see, tarot and oracle decks. It was a month of travel. It was a really interesting month because I started this new series about tarot on travel, and I really love the interactions that you all showed me and the love that you shown by liking and watching my videos. I really appreciate that. If you like this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. More to come. Have a great day.